The hum of the engines filled the cold silence of the cockpit as Captain Alina Voss gripped the control stick, her knuckles white. The sleek, black hull of the Reaper cut through the void of space, darting between shadows cast by distant stars. Voss's eyes were fixed on the flashing red alert on the control panel. Their patrol ships had entered the sector. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Make the run for the next outpost, or risk it all by stopping for the data that could change everything. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Marcus from the comms panel, his voice a steady presence, "we've got 5 minutes before they lock onto us. We can't outrun them forever." Voss's eyes narrowed. The Ver were relentless in their surveillance, and it was only a matter of time before their ships would spot the faint anomaly that the Reaper had caused by jumping into the asteroid field. She reached for the console, bypassing the standard communication channels and activating a secure link to the resistance base on the far side of the sector. "Report," she ordered, her voice cold and commanding. The crackling voice of Dr. Elia, the team's lead scientist, came through the static. "Captain, we've decrypted the Ver transmission logs. The data you brought us is more valuable than we realized. Their mind control system, it's not just a weapon, it's a network, a net they've been casting over humanity for decades. It's already embedded deep within our communications, our technology, our very thoughts." Voss's heart skipped a beat. "Mind control." "Yes," Dr. Elia replied. "The Ver are keeping humanity from advancing, stunting our progress, shaping our culture, and erasing our history. This network is why we've been so easy to ignore, so easy to control. If we can disable it." The comms cut out with a sharp crackle. Voss cursed, her hands flying over the controls as the cockpit lights flickered. The Reaper shuddered under a hail of fire from a nearby Ver scout ship. The radar flashed red as it registered the incoming assault. "We're not going to make it without backup," Marcus shouted from the tactical station. Voss's mind raced. There was no time to wait for reinforcements. Her ship's cloaking technology could keep them hidden for a while longer, but it wouldn't be enough to shake off the Ver's sensors for long. They had one shot at this. "Set course for the station," she commanded, her voice sharp. "I'll take the backdoor route through the debris field. Get ready to jettison the cargo when I give the word." Her crew scrambled into action. Marcus activated the ship's stealth systems, while crew members manned their posts with grim determination. They were all in this together. One slip-up would mean their deaths, but Voss trusted them, each and every one of them. Voss's eyes flicked to the data crystal she had hidden in a compartment beneath the panel. It was the key to exposing everything. Her mind flashed back to the harrowing infiltration mission that had led them to this moment. Voss had barely escaped alive, her body bruised and battered, but her resolve stronger than ever. The Ver were everywhere, but they didn't know what humanity was capable of, yet. With a sharp breath, she flicked a switch, engaging the ship's engines in a burst of speed that sent them hurtling toward the outpost. The asteroid field around them swirled with jagged rock and space debris, a deadly labyrinth that would be their best chance to slip past the Ver. "Get ready," Voss said quietly, her voice steely with determination. The sensors screamed as the Ver scouts drew closer. Voss could feel the sweat on her brow, the pressure mounting. The moment of truth had arrived. With one final glance at the data crystal, she gave the order. "Now." The cargo bay doors opened, and a hidden signal was sent, a flash of static that could be interpreted as a random anomaly to the untrained eye. To the Ver, it was just another piece of noise in the endless expanse of space. But to the Resistance, it was a sign. Humanity was awakening. The data was out there now, and the fight for freedom had just begun. The battle in space was far from over. The Reaper's engines roared as Voss steered the ship through the debris field, the hull groaning under the strain of evading incoming fire. The Ver scouts were relentless, firing pulse beams that streaked across the void with deadly precision, but their targets were always just a heartbeat too late. Every evasive maneuver pushed the ship to its limits, and the crew had to work together to keep the systems online. "Shields at 30%. Marcus shouted from the tactical station. "We're not going to last much longer, Captain." Voss's jaw tightened as she surveyed the situation. The debris field was thinning, and soon the scouts would be able to lock onto them with full force. There was no escape, not without the data, and the Veer had no idea what they were about to lose. "Pull us into a tight turn. Prepare the cloaking device for maximum power," Voss barked. "If we can't outrun them, we'll have to outsmart them." The ship jerked as the turn sent them skimming dangerously close to an asteroid. The cloaking device flickered on, rendering the ship nearly invisible to sensors, but Voss knew it wouldn't hold for long. It was a temporary solution at best. She had to buy time for the mission to succeed. Just as the ship seemed to vanish into the darkness of the asteroid field, a pulse shot through the cockpit, sudden, sharp, and unmistakable. "Captain," Marcus yelled, eyes wide with panic. "The Veer have deployed a disruptor beam. We've lost cloaking." Voss cursed under her breath. The Veer had anticipated their move. The glowing blue of the disruptor beam slashed through the blackness, cutting the Reaper out of the shadows and back into the light. The Veer scouts were closing in, their ships now forming a tight perimeter around the Reaper. There would be no more escape. "Brace for impact," Voss ordered, her voice calm despite the rising chaos. With a sudden jolt, the ship was hit by a barrage of laser fire. The hull screeched in protest as sparks flew from the console. Voss's heart raced as the lights flickered, and the comms crackled. The system was failing. This could be the end of the line for them. But then, amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. "Captain, it's happening," said Dr. Alia, her voice barely audible through the static. "The disruption field. It's triggered. The mind control system is. It's unstable." Voss's pulse quickened as she processed the words. She had no idea what Dr. Alia meant, but there was no time to waste. "What do you mean, unstable?" Voss shouted, gripping the console as the Reaper swerved again, narrowly dodging another strike. "There's a ripple, a reaction in their systems." Dr. Elia's voice became clearer, more urgent. "We can't just disable the mind control network. We can reverse it. Human minds are starting to break free. Their influence is weakening, Captain." Voss froze, her eyes locking onto the flashing alert on the screen. The Veer were the architects of humanity's imprisonment, manipulating not just technology, but thoughts, memories, and desires. They had kept humanity in check by controlling minds across entire colonies. But now, the unthinkable was happening. For the first time, their control was slipping. The resistance had just sparked a chain reaction. Voss's lips curled into a fierce smile. The battle was far from over, but this was the opening humanity needed. The rebellion had been growing, but until now, it had been nothing more than whispers in the dark. Now, there was a chance. Humanity could rise. "Get us out of here," Voss snapped. "Now." The crew worked quickly, rerouting power to the engines and setting a course for the nearest jump point. The Veer, unaware of what was happening, continued their attack, but they were beginning to lose their grip. The system wasn't just unstable, it was collapsing. Voss's mind raced. The data she had stolen could help the resistance fight back, but it was more than that. It was a symbol of something bigger, something that would ignite the spark of rebellion across the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for freedom, for the chance to reclaim their birthright. As the Reaper sped toward the jump point, Voss caught a glimpse of the Veer fleet in her rearview mirror, closing in with menacing speed. But something had shifted. The Veer weren't invincible anymore. They were just another enemy, just another obstacle to be overcome. And this time, humanity wouldn't be silent. The stars outside the Reaper's viewport blurred as the ship leaped into faster-than-light travel, the hum of the engines vibrating through the hull. Captain Voss exhaled deeply, allowing herself a moment of respite. They had escaped the Veer's clutches, barely. The ship was damaged, and several crew members had been injured during the attack. But they had made it, and that was what mattered. For now. Voss turned to the crew. Marcus was already tending to the tactical console, rerouting power to the shield systems, while Dr. Elia worked feverishly at the data terminal. The stolen data was their lifeline now, a fragmented map leading them to a hidden human resistance network scattered across the galaxy. It was time to regroup, to make contact with those who had been quietly preparing for a moment like this. "Status report," Voss ordered, her voice commanding as she stood in front of the crew. "We're in the clear for the moment, Captain," Marcus replied, his brow furrowed as he scanned the readings. "The Vair haven't sent a pursuit team after us yet, but that's only a matter of time. They'll be tracking us now that we've broken their hold on the network." Voss nodded grimly. They couldn't rest for long. The mission had only just begun, and the data they had stolen was far too valuable for the Vair to ignore. The rebellion needed more than just information. They needed allies. Humanity needed to rise, and they needed to rise together. Dr. Elia, her eyes glowing with determination, spoke up, her voice laced with urgency. "The data's coming through, Captain. We've decoded part of it, and I think you'll want to see this." Voss crossed the room to Elia's station, watching as the scientist brought up a series of holographic images. The first was an old map of the galaxy, dotted with red circles representing human colonies, many of which had fallen silent over the years. The second was a series of names, coordinates to hidden bunkers, secret laboratories, and safe houses across the galaxy. The last image was a list of human leaders, those who had quietly defied the Vair for decades, their resistance movements operating under the radar. "Where are these groups?" Voss asked, studying the map closely. "How do we contact them?" "We have to be careful," Eli replied, tapping a few keys. "These networks are underground, literally. They'd been hiding for generations. They're fractured, scattered, and most of them believe humanity is still under Vair control. They'd been isolated for so long that many think their rebellion is a myth. But this could change everything." Voss studied the map, her mind racing. They needed these allies if they were to stand a chance against the Vair, but convincing them to join the fight would be another matter entirely. A voice crackled through the comms, drawing her attention. "Captain, this is Lieutenant Vasquez. We've just intercepted a transmission. It's encrypted, but it's from a human resistance group near the Draith Nebula." Voss's heart skipped a beat. The Draith Nebula was a desolate region of space, a dead zone for most travelers. If any resistance group was operating there, it was likely one of the oldest and most secretive cells. The idea of contacting them was both thrilling and terrifying. "Patch it through," Voss said, her voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The screen flickered before a hologram of a weathered man in his 50s appeared. His expression was grim, his uniform, patched with the insignia of a forgotten human resistance, tattered and worn. "I'm Captain Adriano of the Draith Coalition," the man said, his voice rough. "I've been following your movements, Captain Voss. We know about the data you've stolen. You've ignited a spark we haven't seen in decades, but I'm warning you, if you're serious about this rebellion, you'll need more than just guts and stolen tech. The Vair won't hesitate to wipe you out before you can even rally a single system." Voss met his eyes, unflinching. "We're prepared to fight, Captain. And we need your help. We need to unite the scattered cells before the Vair do." Captain Adriano's face softened slightly, but his eyes remained wary. "I've fought the Vair for 30 years, Captain. I've seen the destruction they leave in their wake. I've lost more people than I care to remember. But if you truly believe humanity has a chance to rise again, then perhaps it's time we stopped whispering in the shadows." Voss's heart clenched at his words. They had always been fighting in silence, hoping that one day someone would lead them to victory. That someone might be her. "We'll make it happen," Voss said firmly. "And we'll need every single one of you if we're going to defeat the Vair." Captain Adriano studied her for a long moment before nodding. Then prepare yourself, Captain. You're about to find out just how deep the Vare's reach truly is. But know this, the moment you take your first step, there's no turning back. The transmission cut out, leaving Voss in the quiet of the command center, her thoughts heavy with the weight of the task ahead. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about liberating humanity from the shackles of oppression. And for the first time in years, it felt like they might actually have a chance. The Draith Nebula loomed on the edge of the galaxy, a swirling expanse of cosmic dust and gas that had long been deemed a graveyard by the few brave enough to venture near. For Voss, however, it was a sign of hope. The last place humanity's most ancient weapon could be hidden, a relic from the first wars against the Vare. The crew of the Reaper had made the jump, and now, drifting in the outskirts of the nebula, they prepared for the unknown. Voss stood at the command center, her fingers drumming lightly on the console, her gaze fixed on the swirling colors of the nebula outside. The ship's sensors had already identified the remnants of a long-abandoned military outpost, one that, according to Adriano, held something of immense power, something that could change the course of their war. "We're close," Voss said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Prepare for planetary descent." Marcus glanced over his shoulder from the tactical station. "Captain, I don't like it. The readings are inconsistent. The atmosphere is unstable, and the gravity wells are messing with our sensors. We could get caught in a drag field and crash." "We don't have a choice," Voss replied, her voice hardening. "We need that weapon, no matter the risk." Dr. Elia, her face tense with determination, was already preparing the secondary data streams. "I've been cross-checking old records. If the archives are accurate, this weapon has the potential to disrupt the Vare's entire control system. It's more than a weapon. It's a message. Humanity's defiance." The tension in the air was palpable as the crew prepped for what was ahead. For many of them, this was their first true taste of battle against the Vare. But for Voss, this was personal. The data had confirmed what she had suspected for years. The Vare were not only invaders, they were usurpers, the remnants of a human empire that had fallen long ago. The weapon they were about to retrieve could strike at the very heart of the Vare's power, possibly even undoing their empire once and for all. The landing craft descended into the planet's atmosphere, shuddering as it passed through the turbulent clouds. As the ship touched down with a jolt, the crew disembarked into the eerie silence of the forgotten outpost, the air thick with dust and the remains of a lost era. They were standing in the shadow of humanity's forgotten past, a relic of a time before the Vare's manipulation. The outpost was cold and lifeless, its halls lined with rusted machinery and broken equipment. The dim, flickering lights barely illuminated their path as they moved deeper into the complex. Voss led the way, her rifle at the ready, her eyes scanning every shadow. They couldn't afford any surprises, not with the Vare's agents potentially lurking nearby. "We're close," Elia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pulled up a holographic map of the facility. "The core should be just ahead. We need to deactivate the security systems before we can access the weapon." Marcus stepped forward, frowning. "I don't like this. It feels too quiet. If this facility was as important as you say, there should be some kind of defense system." Just as he finished speaking, a low rumble echoed through the walls. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the flickering lights went out, leaving them in complete darkness. Voss's pulse quickened, but she remained calm. "Stay alert." A harsh mechanical voice broke the silence, echoing from the shadows. "Warning. Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols initiated." Voss's eyes narrowed. The outpost wasn't as abandoned as they had hoped. The Vare had left something behind. A defense mechanism designed to protect the weapon at all costs. "Shut it down, Elia," Voss ordered, her hand tightening around her rifle. Elia was already working at the console, her fingers flying across the screen. "It's not responding." The system is too integrated. It's linked to the weapon itself. We'll have to disable it manually." The rumbling intensified, and Voss could hear the unmistakable sound of mechanical movement. A heavy thud, followed by another. The floor vibrated as something massive began to stir deep within the facility. "Move," Voss shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. She led the charge down the narrow corridor, the others following closely behind. Behind them, the sound of metal grinding against metal grew louder, followed by a heavy mechanical hiss. Ilya's voice was panicked. "We're almost there. Just a few more meters." They reached the heart of the facility, a massive chamber filled with dormant machinery. In the center, locked in a containment field, was the weapon. It wasn't a traditional weapon at all, but a massive, intricately designed device that pulsed with a strange energy. It seemed almost alive, a piece of ancient technology, powered by a force beyond their understanding. The weapon was humanity's last line of defense, the embodiment of their defiance against the Vair. But there was no time to admire the complexity of the device. The chamber's doors slammed shut with a deafening clang, and the floor beneath them cracked open, releasing an enormous sentry droid, its mechanical eyes glowing red. It was a last-ditch effort from the old human empire to protect their most dangerous secret. Voss didn't hesitate. "Get to the weapon. Now." As the droid advanced, its massive fists raised, ready to crush them all, Voss made the decision that would determine their fate. She had to trust in humanity's ability to fight back. This was their moment to rise or fall. The battle for freedom had just taken an entirely new turn. The massive sentry droid loomed in the center of the chamber, its mechanical limbs grinding against the floor as it moved toward them. Its eyes, red and unblinking, glowed with a cold, calculating malice. The thudding of its footsteps reverberated through the walls, each step a warning of its overwhelming strength. The team had no time to waste. "Marcus, take the left flank," Voss shouted, already unslinging her rifle and raising it. "Elia, get to that control panel. Disable the containment field. We need to get that weapon now." The crew snapped into action. Marcus dashed left, keeping low to the ground, while Voss led the charge directly toward the droid. Her pulse raced as she took aim, firing at the droid's joints with pinpoint accuracy. The blast hit its knee joint, but the droid barely flinched, its armor tough and unyielding. "This thing's not going down easy," Marcus shouted, laying down a suppressing fire that pinged harmlessly off the droid's thick metal plating. Voss's mind raced, strategizing as she moved. They needed to disarm it, break through its defenses, but the droid was too well constructed, too strong to be stopped by conventional weapons. Ilya's voice cut through the chaos, tight with stress. "I'm working as fast as I can, Captain. This system is ancient. There's no manual override. I'm having to reroute power through the secondary core." The sentry droid swung its massive arm with devastating speed. Voss dove to the side just as the fist connected with the ground where she had been standing moments before. The force of the strike shook the chamber, sending a spray of dust and debris into the air. "Voss!" Marcus yelled from his position. "Get out of there. Move." Voss rolled to her feet, narrowly dodging another devastating punch. She glanced back at Ilya, who was sweating with concentration, her hands flying across the console. The weapon was their only chance. She couldn't let this machine stop them. "Focus on the droid," Voss snapped, knowing Ilya wouldn't be able to concentrate if she was worried about their safety. With one swift motion, Voss threw a grenade at the droid's exposed joint, the blast causing the machine to stumble, sparks flying from its leg. The droid let out a low, metallic growl, a noise that sent a chill through Voss's spine. Ilya cursed under her breath. "I've almost got it. Just a little longer," Voss shouted as she fired again, hitting the sentry's chest. The shots made little impact. Time was running out. Marcus's voice rang through the comms, laced with tension. "We can't hold this thing off forever. I'm going to try to disable its power core from the outside." "No," Voss snapped. "We need that core intact. It's the only way we're getting out of here." The sentry roared, its servo motors whirring as it recovered from the grenade blast. It charged again, and this time, it wasn't just swinging fists, it was swinging for the kill. The room erupted in chaos. Marcus was firing relentlessly, but his shots weren't enough to slow the machine's advance. Voss knew they couldn't outrun it much longer. Their only hope was Elia. "Now, Elia," Voss yelled. "Do it now." With a final, desperate push, Elia slammed her hand down on the console. The containment field around the weapon blinked, then vanished in a sudden flash of light. The enormous machine, momentarily distracted, turned toward the now accessible weapon. Voss didn't hesitate. She launched herself forward, grabbing the control panel and slamming a fist down on the activation switch. The weapon hummed to life. The droid paused, its glowing red eyes shifting toward the pulsing energy now radiating from the weapon. Voss's heart raced. It was a power unlike anything she'd ever felt, and it was clear the sentry recognized it. The weapon, with its strange, almost organic energy, was humanity's last hope. Its ancient systems, long dormant, were now awakening, ready to be wielded in their fight for freedom. "Get back," Voss ordered as she took a step toward the weapon, her hand reaching for the control interface. The sentry droid, sensing a threat to its charge, lunged forward, its massive hand reaching for Voss. But it was too late. The moment her fingers touched the device, a shockwave of energy exploded from the weapon, sending a shockwave through the room. The droid was thrown back, its limbs flailing as it crashed into the far wall, sparks flying from its body. Voss struggled to maintain her balance as the pulse of energy rippled through the facility. The power was overwhelming. Humans had never built anything like this before. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature, one capable of bending reality itself. "Voss, we need to move," Marcus shouted as the energy continued to surge. The room was beginning to destabilize, the machinery groaning under the weight of the power now coursing through it. Voss turned to face her team. "The weapon is activated. It's time to leave." Elia, eyes wide with awe and fear, quickly retrieved the data module from the control panel, securing it in a pocket of her suit. They had what they came for, the weapon and the means to turn the tide of the war. But now, they needed to survive the storm they had unleashed. As the walls of the outpost began to shake and groan, Voss motioned for the crew to move. "We've got what we need. Now we make sure humanity has a future." The ground trembled beneath their feet as they raced toward the exit. They didn't look back as the outpost started to collapse behind them. The weapon's power still surging through the facility, its destructive potential now fully realized. But Voss wasn't looking for an escape. She was looking forward, toward the rebellion, and the fight for humanity's freedom. The Veer had no idea what was coming for them. The escape from the crumbling outpost was nothing short of chaotic. As the team sprinted through the corridors, the walls shook violently, the sound of metal bending and cracking reverberating through the air. The weapon had already begun to tear the facility apart, its energy far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The team barely had time to process the magnitude of what they'd activated before they reached the landing bay. But Voss wasn't about to let that distraction cost them their lives. "Keep moving," she barked, her voice cutting through the panic. The outpost was imploding around them, an uncontrollable chain reaction sparked by the weapon's activation. The landing craft was already powered up, the engines roaring to life as they neared. Marcus was the first to board, followed by Elia, who had her face tight with a mixture of awe and fear. Voss was the last to climb into the craft, the last to take a final look at the wreckage of what had once been a proud human military base, now reduced to a pile of rubble, all but forgotten in the depths of space. As the ship launched into the sky, Voss could hear the distant sound of explosions, the debris of the facility scattering into the atmosphere. She glanced out the viewport, watching as the structure disintegrated, consumed by the very force it had guarded for so long. They had gotten the weapon, but its cost was staggering. "We made it," Marcus said, panting heavily. He wiped his brow with a sigh of relief, but there was no smile on his face. "But I don't think the Veer will let this go. They'll be looking for us now." Voss didn't answer immediately. She was too lost in her thoughts. The weapon, an ancient human construct, had proven far more dangerous than they could have known. Its power had nearly torn the facility apart, and it was still pulsing with energy, something she couldn't yet fully understand. What would it mean for humanity if they truly wielded such power? Would they be able to control it, or would it consume them? "We need to regroup," Voss finally said, shaking herself from her reverie. "Find out more about this thing, how it works. We can't use it unless we know its limits." Elia, who had been quiet since they boarded, nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm still processing the data from the control panel. The weapon's energy is unlike anything I've encountered. It's not just some advanced technology. It's almost like it's alive." The words hung in the air like a dark omen, and Voss felt a chill creep up her spine. If the weapon was alive, if it had its own will, then they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Marcus spoke again, his tone grim. "We can't hide the fact that we've got it. The Veer will come after us with everything they have. If they don't already know where we are, they will soon." Voss glanced at the tactical console, watching as the stars passed by at faster than light speeds. She was already calculating their next move. They couldn't afford to rest for long, not while they were in possession of a weapon that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. "We need to make contact with the Resistance," Voss said. "The Draith Coalition can help us organize. We can't do this alone." But as she said it, a new realization dawned on her. Even if they had the weapon, even if they had the Resistance on their side, they were still up against a galaxy that had been under Veer rule for centuries. Humanity was fragmented, scattered across distant systems, each colony and fleet isolated from the others. They didn't have the resources to fight a war on such a scale. But they had something more important, something the Veer had underestimated for far too long: humanity's resolve. "Voss," Elia said, her voice cutting through her thoughts. "I've been looking into the archives of the weapon. There's something off about it, a secondary function that I don't fully understand yet." Voss turned sharply to face her. "What do you mean? A secondary function?" "I'm not sure, but I believe it might be able to interfere with Veer technology on a systemic level. We've seen how their ships and weapons are integrated with their control systems. This device, it might be able to disrupt that integration." "Disrupt their control systems?" Marcus echoed, his eyes narrowing in thought. "That would give us a fighting chance. If we could disable their fleets, their infrastructure." "Exactly," Voss cut in. "But we can't be certain. We need to know more about how the weapon works before we even attempt it. I'm not going to gamble on humanity's future without understanding the risks." Dr. Elia looked down, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of her console. "The weapon. It could also have a deeper connection to the Veer. If this was once part of their own empire, it's possible they've developed countermeasures." Voss clenched her jaw. She hadn't considered that. If the weapon was tied to the Veer's origins, there was a chance that activating it could cause an unexpected backlash. They might have awoken something that would turn the Veer's own systems against them, but it could just as easily turn on them instead. "We need to prepare for both," Voss said firmly. "We don't know what we've unleashed, but we have no choice but to use it. The Veer will come for us, and when they do, we'll make them regret underestimating humanity." As the crew continued to strategize, the stars streaking by outside the ship grew distant, but Voss's mind was sharper than ever. The battle ahead would be unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was a welcome contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. But within the confined space of the Reaper, tension still ran high. Voss paced in the command center, her mind churning with the weight of their next steps. The weapon was both humanity's salvation and its potential doom, and she wasn't certain which way it would tip. Adriano approached, his voice steady but laced with concern. "Captain, We've just received a transmission. It's from the Draith Coalition. They're requesting an urgent meeting. Voss's fingers froze against the edge of the console. The Draith were their best hope of organizing a coordinated rebellion. The transmission could be a lifeline, or a trap. "Patch it through," she said, her tone leaving no room for hesitation. The screen flickered, and an image of General Lyra, a seasoned leader from the Draith Coalition, appeared. Her expression was grim. "Captain Voss," she began, "I've been briefed on your mission. The Resistance is aware of the weapon you've retrieved, but we need to address the bigger picture. The Veer will not sit idly by while you hold such power." "We've already accounted for that," Voss replied, her voice tight. "We need your help to organize a strike against their fleets. We have the means to turn the tide, but we can't do it alone." Lyra shook her head slowly. "You don't understand, Captain. The Veer are not just an alien force. They're integrated into the very fabric of the galaxy. Their control is more insidious than you realize. Their influence stretches beyond their military. Even if we attack, there are sleeper agents embedded in key systems across human-held space." Voss narrowed her eyes, her heart racing. "What do you mean, sleeper agents?" Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Veer have been manipulating humanity for centuries, shaping governments, influencing leaders, even planting agents within the ranks of the rebellion itself. If we move too openly, we risk being infiltrated from within." Voss's mind whirled. The idea of betrayal within their ranks was more than just a possibility. It was a reality that could shatter everything they had fought for. "You're saying there could be Veer operatives among us?" "Not just among you," Lyra confirmed. "Among the Draith Coalition as well. We've been compromised for years, Captain. The weapon you've retrieved, it might be humanity's only hope, but using it comes with a great cost. We don't know how deeply the Veer have embedded themselves. And there's something else you should know." Voss leaned in. "What is it?" Lyra hesitated before speaking, her voice barely audible. "We've intercepted reports from within the Veer hierarchy. The weapon you have is not a relic from the past. It was created to be a failsafe in case their empire ever faced a rebellion. It was designed to prevent their control from being broken, and if activated in the wrong way, it could trigger a signal across their entire network, calling every Veer fleet to your position." Voss's breath caught in her throat. She had known the weapon was powerful, but she hadn't understood the full extent of its potential. "You're telling me it could summon the entire Veer fleet?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. If you attempt to use it recklessly, the Veer will descend on you with everything they have. But if used strategically, it could give us the edge we need." Voss was silent for a long moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They had no choice but to use the weapon, but it could be a double-edged sword. If the Veer detected its activation, they would become a target for an overwhelming force. "I understand the risks," Voss said, her voice steady now. "But we don't have a choice. The Veer are already coming for us. If we don't act, we lose everything." Lyra's expression softened, but her eyes remained hard with determination. "You're right. We fight or we die. But you need to be cautious. We can't afford to make a move until we can identify the traitors in our midst." Voss nodded. "We'll handle it. We'll find out who's working with them. And when we're ready, we'll strike." Lyra paused, then added one final piece of advice. "And Captain, when the time comes, don't hesitate. The weapon will only work if you trust in it completely. Doubt will destroy you." The transmission ended, and the screen flickered back to the empty command center. Voss stood there for a long moment, the weight of Lyra's words heavy in her chest. They were at a precipice now, with no way back. The fight for humanity's survival was about to enter its most dangerous phase. "Adriano," Voss said, breaking the silence, "I want a full audit of our crew's backgrounds. We need to find out who might be compromised. I don't care how long it takes." Adriano nodded, his expression resolute. "On it, Captain. I'll get the team on it right away." Voss took a deep breath, turning to face her crew. We've already made enemies of the Ver. Now we need to uncover the ones hiding among us. The rebellion had reached a crossroads. They no longer only fought an external enemy, they now had to root out the enemy within. The days that followed were a blur of tension and uncertainty. Every member of the Reaper was under scrutiny, their movements watched, their loyalty questioned. Voss had authorized a full investigation into the crew, but the closer they came to uncovering the truth, the more unsettling the situation became. It wasn't just the Ver they were fighting. It was the very trust that held them together. The tension in the ship's common area was palpable. Adriano, Elia, and Marcus sat at the table, their faces tight with anxiety. Voss stood at the far end of the room, her hands clasped behind her back, as she stared out of the viewport into the cold vastness of space. She hadn't spoken to anyone in hours, her thoughts consumed by the mission, by the weight of their choices. "Captain," Adriano's voice broke the silence. "We've found something." Voss turned, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "We've identified 3 crew members whose backgrounds don't add up. We've traced their records. They've all been in contact with people who could have Ver affiliations." Voss's pulse quickened. The crew had been a family to her, and the thought of betrayal, of someone working against them from within, hit her harder than she cared to admit. She had trusted them all with her life. "Are they still on the ship?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. "Not yet," Adriano replied. "We've locked them down in the brig for now. We'll need to act fast, Captain. If the Ver have planted operatives here, it won't be long before they make a move." Voss nodded. "Prepare a strike team. We'll take them into custody, but we do it quietly. We can't risk alerting the rest of the crew. If we're wrong about this, it could tear us apart." The team moved quickly, securing the 3 suspects without incident. Voss watched from the bridge as Adriano and Marcus led the traitors into the brig. There was no turning back now. They either found the truth, or they'd lost everything. Hours passed, and the tension in the ship only grew. Elia was on the bridge with Voss, monitoring the systems and scanning for any signs of Ver activity. "Nothing yet," she said, her voice tight. "But we're nearing the edge of Draith space. Once we cross the threshold, there's no turning back." "We're ready," Voss replied, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring Elia or herself. The ship shuddered slightly as it passed into Draith space, but the stillness that followed was almost suffocating. Everyone on board had prepared for this moment. Their actions would determine whether humanity had a future, or if it would fall under the suffocating grip of the Ver. Adriano's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, we've got a situation." Voss's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "They've activated something," Adriano said, his voice strained. "One of the suspects triggered a distress signal. We don't know how, but it looks like they've sent a message to someone out there. We've got to act now." Voss gritted her teeth, a cold fury rising in her chest. "Prepare the ship for battle. We're not giving them the chance to contact the Ver. If we've been compromised, we'll deal with it later." Adriano's voice was tense, but his resolve was clear. "Understood, Captain." In a matter of minutes, the crew was on high alert. Voss stood at the helm, her mind racing. They had been betrayed, but they couldn't afford to let the Ver have the advantage. Not now. The door to the brig opened with a soft hiss, and Adriano, Marcus, and Elia entered. Voss turned to face them, her eyes hard. "Report." "Captain," Adriano said, his voice low. The suspects were innocent. Voss blinked, confusion flooding her. "What?" "But the records. They were planted," Adriano continued, his face grim. "The Ver were trying to discredit them, framed them as traitors. Whoever did this was trying to turn the crew against each other." Voss's mind reeled. The Ver were far more insidious than she'd thought. They didn't just want to eliminate the rebellion. They wanted to destroy the very foundation of trust that kept it standing. She could feel her chest tightening, the weight of the decision bearing down on her. "We can't trust anyone," Voss muttered, a bitter edge to her voice, even within our own ranks. Ilya stepped forward, her face pale. "Captain, there's more. I've been analyzing the distress signal. It's not a normal message. It's a trigger. The Vare know exactly where we are. The countdown to their arrival has begun." Voss felt the blood drain from her face. The Vare were coming. They'd been lured into a trap, one that had been set long before they even retrieved the weapon. Her gaze hardened as she turned to face her crew. "Then we'll give them a fight they'll never forget." The moment of truth had arrived. The weapon, the traitors, the endless hours of preparation. It all came down to this. There was no more time for second-guessing, no more time for hesitation. The final stand had begun.